Welcome back to the Jason Rantz Show on AM 770 KTTH and, of course, 94.5 FM on the Greater East Side. Our friend Tim Eyman just announced he is helping to promote 2 ballot initiatives that would state a state income tax as well as a carbon tax here in Washington State. Tim Eyman joins me now. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me on.
So you got 2 more ballot initiatives that you're jumping on. This time they are very clearly separate. For everyone wondering whether or not it might violate some sort of rule. Take us through the 2.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, obviously, despite our best efforts to help Lauren Culp in his run for governor, Inslee's got this 3rd term. And the Democrats are now the craziest, most socialists we've ever seen. I mean, like a Zach Hutchins, who was completely liberal, got beat out by an even more liberal legislator. So the Democrats are totally in charge. They have more than enough votes to impose taxes next legislative session. And the 2 biggies, the ones that bring in the most amount of money, the one that they want to capitalize the most on this lockdown and COVID, would be an income tax and a carbon tax. Despite the fact the voters have said no to an income tax 9 times, despite the fact that the voters have said no to a carbon tax 2 times, that would not deter them from doing that. So there are 2 separate initiatives. One is we don't want an income tax. The other, we don't want a carbon tax. Both of them prohibit state and local governments from imposing either tax in each separate initiative.
So do you think, just talking legislatively, because you mentioned that obviously the Democrats have gotten way more progressive and socialist in Olympia, but not all of the Democrats actually support this. You've got folks like a Mark Mullet, for example, who right now is still narrowly being reelected. He is more moderate, certainly on these issues. Do you think that there might be enough defectors from the Democratic Party that legislatively they could address this?
We can always hope that. But I prefer not to hope for the best. I'd rather plan for the worst. Yeah. And the nice part about these initiatives is we're not just trying to overturn what we think they're going to do. It would prohibit for all time. It would create a statute that says state and any local government is prohibited from imposing any kind of income tax. The state and any local government cannot impose any kind of carbon tax. That is a statewide prohibition, statutorily imposed, and it would give the voters a chance to have some peace of mind that we can finally stop this incessant effort to go, well, how about this income tax? How about this income tax? How about this carbon tax? How about this carbon tax? Let's just have a final debate and just say these 2 particular tax increases, new taxes, we don't want. We don't want them in any form. I think that is the kind of going on offense approach we need to do rather than just defensively sitting back and hoping that, let's say a Mark Mullet that barely won is maybe going to be more scared moving forward and less moderate and more crazy just because he says, well, geez, I don't want to get primaried the next time.
So let's talk about the reason why both of these are just awful ideas, the idea of a state income tax or a carbon tax. For the sake of this conversation, let us ignore the economic reality due to the pandemic, because the fact that the Democrats are even talking about income taxes or any new taxes, period, at a time where the economy is struggling is just so ridiculous and beyond me. Pushing that aside, in a normal world, you hear the normal reaction of, well, an income tax is just going to go after the people who are wealthy, and so many other states, they've got income taxes and they're doing fine. What is your talking point in response? What is your reaction?
Well, it's a Pandora's box. Both of these tax increases are total Pandora's box. If you allow them, for mixing metaphors, to get the camel's nose under the tent and allow them to be able to have one, once they create the infrastructure for either of these, it's so easy to expand it and make it bigger. The sales tax, 60 years ago was 2%. Now it's all the way up to like 10, 11% in some jurisdictions. You allow a little income tax, you're going to have an income tax on everybody. And one of the few things that our state has going for it is we're one of the few states that doesn't have an income tax. And if you want to have industries being, developed here and staying here, you want to make sure that you keep that competitive advantage we've got. I mean, we just lost Boeing despite the fact we don't have an income tax. Imagine if we had an income tax, how many more industries we would lose.
Well, and it brings me to the carbon tax. If you're just joining us, by the way, we're talking with Tim Eyman, who is helping a political action committee called Permanent Offense to get on the ballot two initiatives that would guarantee no state income tax or carbon tax in the state of Washington moving forward. A carbon tax, this whole idea, Jay Inslee's been all over it. The people have said multiple times no to this as recently as just a couple years ago, and yet it's still being considered. A carbon tax simply gets a tax passed on to the consumer by the businesses getting hit.
Exactly.
That's how it works.
And that's what's so attractive to them. There's two things they love about the carbon tax. One, it generates a massive amount of money, and that's what they're looking for. They want billions. They want to take advantage of this situation because in an emergency, you never want to waste it. And so they're not going to do little nickel and dime tax increases. They want to go for the big money, and the big money is an income tax and a carbon tax. And the carbon tax, what's so insidious about it, and they love this talking point, is don't worry, we're not taxing you. It's those big, greedy oil companies, as if the greedy oil companies are just going to eat it. I don't disagree they're greedy. They're greedy to the point where they would just pass the tax on to the individual consumer and make it so easy for them to go, well, if it's $25 a barrel in tax this year, why not 50? Why not 100? Why not 300, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road? It is an absolute Pandora's box that you can't allow them to open. And with both of these, it's not just state government. We want to make sure that there isn't any local government, let's say Seattle, that wants to impose its own income tax or its own carbon tax and allow it to metastasize. This prohibits state and local governments, no county, no city, from imposing either of these things as well.
Well, and it also doesn't satisfy any good faith efforts here. So let's just say there was a good faith effort in carbon tax. You're doing this because you want to protect the environment. Okay, but if it's going to be passed on to the consumer, then the environment does not get better as a result of the carbon emissions being lessened. It just continues, and we still pay for it. And in another worst-case scenario, in a state where it's more expensive to do business, let's say a carbon tax wouldn't end up getting passed along to the consumers. They'll just do business elsewhere.
Absolutely. And the big point that I would really emphasize is that we've all grown complacent, that we all think, don't worry, an income tax isn't constitutional. And the reality is the Democrats know that they've got 9 of the most crazy, out-of-control Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court right now that are not bound in any way by past precedents. And they would easily be able to pass something like this. Our side suddenly, hires a bunch of lawyers and say, oh, well, we've got the precedents on our side, and assume that that's going to save the day. I don't want to rely on judges to save the day. I want to rely on the voters that have consistently said they don't want this, and creating a statutory law that says you cannot have any kind of income tax, whether it's on net, gross, adjusted gross income, capital gains income, or any other type of income. One of the little holes in the statutes that gives them their opening is there's no definition of income anywhere in the statutes. And so they say, well, a capital gains tax isn't really an income tax because capital gains isn't income, isn't property. And it's that judicial interpretation that they're counting on. You create a statute, and all this stuff that I'm proposing has been introduced as bills in Olympia by legislators and attorneys. I'm simply grabbing onto those and putting these broad prohibitions on them at the state and local level to make sure that they can't impose these kind of taxes in the future. If
you want to help out on this, go to Tim's website or the PAC's website, permanentoffense.com, permanentoffense.com. We've only got about a minute left. Give us an update on where you stand with Attorney General Bob Ferguson.
Well, always a joy. The first thing is we are doing a motion for reconsideration on our $30 tabs ruling from the Supreme Court, highlighting the fact that this King County judge did find it constitutional, found single subject, found the fact that the initiative was nothing wrong with the description. But then I am in this other pitched battle with the Attorney General, 8 years of investigation, litigation, and persecution of me and my family, and we're going to be in court next week, Monday through Thursday with the trial of the century, my own Washington State's own O.J. Simpson trial, where they're going after me, seeking a lifetime ban on all my future political activity. So I got to put in the plug. My legal defense fund is timdefense.com, timdefense.com, and for 8 years, these guys have been coming after me. The AG spent $2 million of taxpayer money, more money than all cases over the last 7 years combined, more than that, going after me. And the only reason I'm still around is because people have been nice enough to help me with this legal defense fund. So it's timdefense.com, and if you could help with that, I'd like to be able to pay my lawyers.
Well, we wish you the best of luck in that. And, of course, we also wish you the best of luck in these two ballot initiatives that would stop a state income tax and a carbon tax here in Washington State. Tim, Eyman, thank you so much for stopping by. Really appreciate it.
Hey, really, really appreciate it. We don't want an income tax. We don't want a carbon tax.
No, we don't. You're listening to The Jason Rantz Show. When we come back.